started, it's a 2-hour meeting tonight? Is that what we decided on? Okay. So, do help yourselves to food. You know, as usual, we have a pretty dense meeting. We're gonna go through the worksheet. Ron, I don't know if you have any of the worksheet other than the documents for the small groups. Do you have you do?
I don't have handouts.
Okay.
But you sent, they were
I sent
sent.
it out.
It was-
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
One of
So that's question
One and three, but not the others, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so we at least get to look at those.
that was the
That's a
thing.
good, yeah. And then we're gonna discuss property. I think we should all discuss how we all wanna work on that, because those are important. Then continue to review the accelerated merger financial option. Talk about the questions, community engagement, and future meetings. So, folks who do we have visitors? Welcome. So what we have decided to do with community involvement and public comments is that in a few minutes, we'll ask you if you have anything that you would like to say. We're not gonna engage in conversation, because we are a study committee, but we will hear your thoughts, and we'll take about 5 minutes for that. So whoever wants to talk, we'll balance it up. We'll balance it between the people who want to speak. Okay, let's review the minutes. Is there a motion?
I had a question for.
Okay, let's have a motion.
I move the minutes of the December 3rd meeting as presented.
Okay, any questions?
So, on this, just to be clear, Brattleboro actually should probably be split out. I sent Amy just a quick note. Minor, but it's major in some ways. We all are there's 3 of us from one board, and then there's the WHS board. And we're not actually replaceable. We got to discussing that last night just because of who might be here, and we knew Ian would not be here with Ricky. So just to be clear, if we might want to break out one more section.
Okay. I think that makes sense, right? Okay. We're all agreed? Okay. Okay, anything else? No? No more discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No, okay, they stand. So this is the time where we recognize folks who are visiting. Do any of 3 of you, oh, hey, Mike. So Mike, just so you know, welcome. For public comments in the setting, I don't know if you have any, but we're not having a dialogue with folks. We're just here to listen for just a few minutes. So there you go. Okay. If you have something to say, why don't you stand up and say who you are? And also, does any of the other visitors are planning to say anything? You have a question? Okay, so we won't be really answering questions. So you have a few minutes and then
Hi, I'm Jody Normando, and I'm from Dummerston. I have been involved in education on the sidelines and in the trenches since 1970. What I'm concerned about, very concerned about, is this is a one-way train on one track, and it's been that way since the whole start of this process. Some of the other unions and boards have looked at this a little differently and looked at all the facets of this Act 49. Wyndham Central took the accelerated, whatever you call it, right off the table so that they could talk about all the other issues and not deal with the accelerated. There are so many other issues involved in this, much more valuable than finances. And for small communities around this area, there are an awful lot of issues. And I'm really upset that this study committee has not taken the opportunity to look at those. It came out at our Dummerston meeting the other day, which was the first real community meeting where people came and got involved, and it was a good meeting. Amy ran a very good meeting. prefaced everything beautifully, and we had a lot of comments. But it came out at that meeting that we pay $60,000 to $80,000 for a prisoner in the state of Vermont. And here we are fighting over $15,000 to $20,000 to educate a child? Where are our priorities? This is ridiculous. We need to be talking about education. We need to be talking about our town meetings. We need to be talking about our communities. So, you know, I'm really upset that we are going this way. You didn't start your meetings until the middle of November. You're going to have it all set to go to town meetings, which will probably be our last town meeting, by January. That's not a lot of time to study all of these issues. So I am asking you to please stop this process now and go on and put it aside. You can pick it up next year. They're going to change things. I've been in communication with a lot of our legislators. They're going to change more than the cap when they get to the legislator. A lot of our legislators who voted for this who are not in favor of it. One of them told me, and I don't know why she voted for it, but she said it's the stupidest bill in the world. So that's basically what I've got to say. I realize we only have 5 minutes and this is a study committee and I wish there was more public involvement. But I have got things, I've got handouts. And I would hope that you would all take an opportunity to read this and think about the other, these are not mine, and think about the other aspects of this bill.
Thank you. What do you have to say?
So I'm Marilyn McQuaid.
I don't know how many of these I've got here, but
Sorry.
that's okay, Frank.
So it's now
You've
time.
already got this. You can have that again.
Okay,
You're gonna talk next.
Jody, thank you. We're now moving on to, what's your name?
Marilyn.
Yeah.
Marilyn. I'm from Vernon, and I've been attending the meetings regularly. And at the last
Could you stand
meeting,
up?
we started to go over, we started to go over the sort of financial impact of Act 46 and the accelerated model. And we didn't really cover Vernon. And there was some discussion about sort of the ability to let people see what was going on, and that was a little unclear to me. So my question is, as not a voting member of this committee, is there any way to access that information to be able to look at it on a town level?
Do you want to quickly address that?
So
Or
that-
who, folks from Vernon? Do you want to?
Well, I can give you real
Yeah.
quick. So the model does provide the town level analysis. So I don't know, we were at Dummerston at one of our meetings and then another one at the study committee. And it allows us to select the town and see the comparison, and we do have a handout. Probably have a copy here that we could give you.
Okay,
So you would see the Vernon
right,
Yeah.
impact.
okay.
Yeah, and so we're gonna show that again tonight, and we can make sure we specifically look at Vernon. I think at the last board meeting, we just didn't have a chance to share the document, which we will do in a subsequent meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. It has to be short because I didn't think you were going to
I'll
say
make it
anything.
very quick. Rick Mills from Dummerston. I just want to make a public comment real quick, and thank you all for your work, and I can appreciate what you're all up against. When I voted for a study committee, the study committee, I feel it's like a kind of a misleading name. It's actually a decision, okay? I thought that the name, I took from the name that it was going to be a fact-finding, presenting it back to the boards, and I just think that the name study committee was a little bit misleading as the purpose. I wish you good luck in whatever decision you make. Eventually, it's going to have to go back to the voters, but I think it could be somewhat divisive when it goes back to the boards for mock consideration at least.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Okay. So I encourage you guys to eat if you aren't, because there's enough food.
And I guess you should eat as
Feel
well.
free to, yeah.
Thank you.
So educational programming and 9 and 10. Does that make sense that we're just going to dig into those? Yeah? Okay, so 2 small groups met. I attended both of those meetings and I felt good about it. I think we were pretty efficient. So the idea was just to, in the small group setting, to explore questions that the larger group would ask and begin to flush out some answers. We didn't cover everything at all, nor were decisions made, nor recommendations. So it was the beginning of a process, but I think they were pretty helpful. Why don't we go ahead to educational programming? Lyle, do you want to speak to that?
So,
Is that okay that Lyle goes, yeah?
thank you. So Jill had sent around a spreadsheet to all the schools, and looking at that, looking at samples of what other consolidated districts have put together for goals 1 and goals 3, talking about equity. I put together this very draft narrative to talk about some of the opportunities that we would have if we moved to a unified district. The subgroup met yesterday, and we talked a little bit about how specific we should be, how tied to what we put in this goal will we be if we're too specific. And so what you have before you are ideas taken from those things that I just described. And as I said, it's very draft. There are some margin notes there, just notes from our discussions yesterday at the subcommittee. So questions would be easier.
Did everyone read it? Mark, you read it?
See, that's a check. Okay.
I don't know if anybody had an opportunity to look at the Vermont Digger website. There was an article about 3 mergers that were approved, and there was a link to one of them, and it was actually all their info. And I know in our little small group, we talked about how specific to get, and I noticed in just glancing through that they were very general. So,
Other things that we touched on yesterday, talking about what equity actually means. And so some schools right now have foreign language offered in the school day. Does equity mean that every school has to offer foreign language? And how would that come to be? Because it would certainly be too much of a burden to all of a sudden in 4 additional schools add foreign language. So talked about how would that be phased in, so that there would be the equity piece of foreign language available if the school chose to do that, but not a huge impact at one time. We talked about opportunities to expand after-school programming, and that could be accomplished through transporting students. There are some schools right now that have very extensive after-school programs, and opening those up to additional students from other schools. And then the other thing that we talked about was sharing assets and facilities. For instance, Putney has a extensive forest here, and opening that up to some after-school activities, and again, transporting students here, or opening it up for science classes or whatever from other schools to be able to come use the forest in that way as well.
Mark says logging more.
Logging? We actually do need some logging.
Cost offset.
The other thing that we talked about was, thinking about all of these ideas of what we could do, but being able to put a cost to them to present to the towns, because I think we talked about conceptual ideas. It sounds good, but what does it look like on paper and on a budget, and how are we really going to accomplish that?
I've got a question. When we're calling these assets, like the forest and other facilities that the various districts have, would we not instead want to call these resources that can be used, by all, if they so choose? Simply because you have a forest does not mean we need to tiptoe through it from time to time by all the schools of the district. All the schools of the district are pretty close to trees. That's the nature of them. So simply because you have a forest, I'm not even sure that should be in the discussion. far
Well,
as
they use
assets.
it for classes, is the thought, why it was on there as an act.
You know, Green Street and Oak Grove may be a little shy of Forest, but Academy's got a nice one out back. So is Guilford and Vernon.
But it's not 200 acres, it's deeded to the school, right? That's the deal in this.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
It's 200 acres of land. We don't have that in Brattleboro.
Well, we don't, but we're right next to a model preserved.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's, I think it's the asset of the land.
It's in ownership by the school.
Yeah, but it's only realized value if you get rid of the asset and realize the cash value, isn't it? Monetary value, sell it.
Well, if you use it, you're getting the value by using it.
it's, I think we might be, we don't know of any other school that has
A forest?
a forest of that size. It's a pretty unusual situation.
I don't know what, wouldn't it be ultimately up to the Putney School Board to decide what to do with that asset?
Yeah, I think the other part of this is when we do the articles of, what is it called? Those sorts of assets are identified.
Yeah.
So they're maintained by that entity.
Right.
It doesn't just go into a unified district.
And I think the Putney Forest is just an example of how we, of a resource that we could all potentially access, the benefit of being unified.
Although you probably wouldn't kick out schools that asked you to come use it now, but.
No, but it's, people don't, other schools don't access it because they
Don't think about it.
don't realize that it's, we've got trails and, it's a very active program.
So the other thing we did talk about yesterday was choice, and the program choice, and also the thing that surprised me yesterday, maybe not everybody in the room knows, that we don't all go to school for the same amount of time each day. I thought we did, but we don't. So those would be something to look at. But so the school choice, Ron passed around something, and I read this twice and decided that I needed to apparently spend more time with lawyers or law degree in training because I wasn't sure I got it when I finished reading.
Well, Donna Russo Savage, who is the, Mike, you probably know what her position, she was kind of a legal counsel for the.
She's a lawyer that writes legislation focused on education, and she wrote most of this.
She currently now works for the, she currently works for the AOE as part of the Project 46 work. And Mike Hebert had received, had asked her about the Vernon situation, the tuitioning, and so she provided this document. I think the most cogent part of it is on page 4 and 5. So, again, I'm not sure how many people have it. It was sent out this morning at some point. But section 4 states that in part that nothing in this act shall require a district to limit the options available to students if it ceases to exist as a discrete entity and realigns into a supervisory district or union district. And it continues to go into that. But I think the important element is on page 5. It's cited as Vernon in particular. It's important to note at the top of 5 that there is an existing practice in one union school district that proponents could cite in support of this broad interpretation of section 4. In 2006, the General Assembly enacted Act 182, section 28, which authorizes a town school district to both be a member of the Union High School District and concurrently pay tuition for resident students in grades 7 to 12. It is my understanding that this authority applies solely to Vernon. It is not granted or requested by any other members of the Brattleboro Union High School District or any members of another union school district. Section 28 grants formal legislative approval to what appears to have been a long-standing practice originally validated in July 30th, 1954 by the opinion number 13 of Vermont Attorney General. So what she's saying is that practice can continue, but she also adds later on that, it is unclear if it was challenged at the Vermont Supreme Court, what their findings would be.
But she also spends the first 2 pages talking about how you can't do one thing. Right, so therefore,
So the state board talked about this more recently. And again, use Vernon as an example, that their intention is not to change those arrangements. Now, it would be the supervisory district that would agree that that is a long-standing tradition that Vernon would maintain. And so that's her take on it.
so let me summarize what I think you said.
Yeah.
And what I almost think she said, but honestly, I'm glad to hear she is a lawyer, because that's how I read it. That we all could decide as a group, if we went forward with this, that, okay, Vernon, you have that, we're fine with it, we'll leave it there. And that the Agency of Education could say, fine, and that even then, at some point, it could be challenged by somebody else, at some, I don't know.
We talked to Donna Russo Savage a couple weeks ago, and I actually brought up this again, and she confirmed that, yeah, you as a supervisory district would maintain that practice. And she said, quite frankly, the people that would challenge it would be within your district. It wouldn't be,
Right, I can't
it
see
wouldn't
why
be some
Rutland
other
would care.
districts. And, you know, there are a couple of other districts that have neighboring, like neighboring New York and neighboring New Hampshire that have a similar, they don't have a law associated with it, but they do have a similar tuitioning situation because of proximity. I was pleased to hear from her that this, her interpretation of this. And then confirmed with the Agency of Ed and the State Board that that's their intention. It's not to dismantle a longstanding practice.
Okay.
So can I, just because I've read a lot about this, so the Brigham decision that was found unconstitutional, that children attending school in a similar district have to get choice or not choice, you can't combine into one. Only Vernon would be excluded from that ruling in this?
I can't speak to that. I really can't.
Because I mean, I've read stuff on the site that they don't think it would actually survive a challenge. And so many schools, so many districts consolidating are faced with this, that maybe if it's just Vernon, it would just be the people in the room. But if there's 50 districts that want to keep choice but want to merge and consolidate, somebody will bring that up. So, I would think, if it's just us and we're the only ones that are excluded for some reason, then I think that would be true.
What I understand, I don't know the specifics, but Windsor has an arrangement where they've had choice to other districts back and forth that they have to make adjustments to those sorts of arrangements. But I don't know their specifics. And I don't quite frankly, I don't think this issue is the same as theirs.
Right, yeah, so I'm trying to figure out if there's somehow we have like if Vernon has some sort of golden pass.
They do.
compared to what everybody
That's
else.
kind of what it is.
That's what I'm asking. So
yeah.
there's nobody else in the state that would get a golden ticket like Vernon.
That's right, in that this occurred in 1954. It was a law passed and then affirmed again in 2006. So that is a one-of-a-kind circumstance, unlike most supervisory unions, and that is why an accelerated path is a viable option for this supervisory union, where it simply is not for many supervisory unions, as you point out, because of the configuration of choice,
Right.
where 3 or 4 towns have it, 3 or 4 towns don't. Those supervisory unions really don't have a viable path for the accelerated. They certainly have those other paths that are available.
So can I ask this, I hope it's just the obvious question, but for all of us in here, first, Matt, does Vernon want to continue with the situation the way it is?
I can't speak for everyone, but one would have to think that that would be the case.
And so the rest of us are okay with that? I mean, it's the standing now. Is there any concern among this study group that we would want to?
I think we're here for consensus and not to dismantle anything that's already in place.
What are your thoughts, Jill?
Perfectly fine with me. I just thought we should just be really clear, as long as I'm not assume anything, as long as we're all sitting here. What are you talking about, the forest still over?
I didn't say about stills.
The logger in the corner.
The logger.
I think I would be interested in knowing how much that costs, just so that I'm aware, we are all aware of the equation.
It actually saves the district money because most of the students that are neighboring the agreement or the practice have been with Pioneer Regional High School, and their tuition is lower than BUHS's. So it actually,
But their option would, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, is that the same for the kids that are going to private schools still too?
they,
State average.
yeah, they only allow the state average.
Yeah, the policies don't allow a state average. There possibly could be a couple kids at other schools in the state that are public schools, and it could be a little bit different. I think we ran into one situation like that, but that's the
It
exception.
can't exceed the state average,
Totals
which is again below the BUHS.
60 or 70 kids, maybe 750,000, somewhere in that range.
I'm actually surprised that there's not more of a conversation on this.
I don't know how I would have that conversation it's never come up. I mean, this is a whole situation that we've never dealt with in Dummerston, so how can I have a conversation about it? We have a lot of attorneys in Dummerston that pay for private school. They might like to get that money, and it might be worth their time.
So that's why I was wondering
Yeah.
why, because I would imagine that this is something that,
We have to bring back to this, I don't know how to
well,
bring back to
I
the
would
vote.
imagine that this would be one of the issues of concern for folks.
But this is not something that would be open to any other town in
Right.
the consolidated district. It would
So
only be-
basically, if it's a concern, it would have to become such a high level of concern that you'd have to have a whole bunch of parents that convince your board to come forward and now say to this group, we don't think that Dummerston should let this go forward until all of Dummerston can do this, or
No,
whatever.
what I'm talking is somebody later could go to the ACLU and say it's unconstitutional, this arrangement in the supervisory unions. So it wouldn't be a school board issue, it would be a legal issue.
Yeah.
I guess I think, from that perspective, that if they were gonna do that, they might already be thinking that way, because they're in the same supervisory union, but, but I think your point, Alice, is interesting, what's the actual monetary implication of this?
I think that, I'm sorry, I can't see you here. Keep going, and now you're done.
Well, it's kind of a similar question like Beth and I were saying about, well, how would we phase in foreign language? We need to know the numbers so that we can look at it realistically to take back to everybody on the boards and to our towns when people are voting. What does this really mean? So to say, and I understand completely what Lyle is saying, to say in our narrative, stuff that's broad enough that we're not suddenly locked in if things don't make financial sense or are not feasible because you don't have enough hours in the day or for whatever reason. But we as a group need to have real numbers to look at that sort of stuff.
Yep. I'm inclined to make an exception and let Mike quickly step in, is that all right? Do you have a comment from what you've
I
learned?
just wanted to say, this is a very big issue, just a little bit north of here in Westminster,
Yeah.
in regards to the Compass School, and it may impact what happens in this district as well.
Yep.
Why, I don't get Westminster, what,
Do you want to flush that out because of school choice?
Sure.
Can you explain that?
The Westminster Center School goes up to grade 6, so 7th and 8th graders can have choice right now. It's kind of a sticky situation whether that's going to continue. The Compass School is in Westminster. They draw a lot of students from there right now, so it's up in the air. And there's a lot of energy in Westminster to push that, to continue to support the way it is there now.
so why would that affect us? Are the same
It
kids?
wouldn't necessarily, that wouldn't affect us, but it's an issue that is important to those taxpayers and would, as likely might be an issue for ours.
And it may, with the Vernon carve-out, they may say we want the same thing.
Well, that also means BUHS has to be good.
So I think overall though, along with trying to preserve the cultures at each of the schools, preserving that type of feature to a specific school in town, would be another goal of our overarching, objectives in terms of, proposing, making some kind of recommendations. So I think costs would be interesting. Jill, I don't think we'll ever really have real costs, because at this point, it's an estimate, where we can only estimate what our savings might be and what our potential costs might be. But we really should be looking at the educational opportunities as well, that we can provide all of the kids, you know.
So, anything more on programming? I mean,
My comment on, I think, an email about some of the equity issues, things like school time. A lot of that has to do with the busing and the time of getting students to and from school, and that's caused a very small variance within some of the school districts.
Well, so is it like 5 minutes or
Yeah,
45?
it's like, oh no, it's 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in some of the programmatic things, it's, there's assumptions here that are not correct. Emerson does have foreign language. A couple of things through here.
Where are the assumptions from and what I sent to the question?
Yeah.
And that's why I said I didn't know, but I took them off the Excel spreadsheet or the Google Doc thing.
Yeah, I think I'm using a different document. What's that? Yeah, because, and I actually have copies here if you want.
Yeah, do that.
Because I found people were just adding things and it wasn't accurate. So I kind of said, I can't deal with that. So I made my own with the accurate information.
That's helpful.
So,
Yes.
just the way I work.
And then we have to write on there, no longer valid.
So,
So I guess my question is then where do we go from here? Like, so we've had this discussion now, what?
For choice.
we should,
No, not just for choice, but for this, we're talking about the programming question here.
so what I would look at from these draft paragraphs are, we put it into the report.
Yeah.
I'm looking at like 3 different versions that, from school districts that did the reports.
Okay.
And I think this document is excellent that the committee came up with.
Actually, Lyle did.
Well, there's some behind the scenes as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So anyway, so if the subcommittee thinks it was good information, and this group thinks it's good, which I think you should, then we start putting it together in the report format. So that covers goals 1 and 3, and when I look at other districts that have done this, number 2 is just a general statement anyway.
yeah.
When you get to 5, the proposed union school district will deliver education at a cost that parents and voters and taxpayers value. Well, I don't know how to do that, other than what other districts have done is put the financial models in their document. So
Sorry.
so they show the do-nothing thing, and then they show the incentives or the conventional. So, and that's what we want to go over again tonight. So, I mean, that you put that into this document.
How do we address then to the towns? The report is good if that's meeting the objective of the report, but to take that back to the towns, how do we explain to them that now all of a sudden we're all just miraculously gonna have this in a program? And like, how is that gonna work? And how do we communicate that and how do we figure that out? And is that the job of this study committee? Like,
I think it is the job of this study committee, but perhaps, and that's just my suggestion, but perhaps not the job that we have right now.
Right.
I think that's,
But what if our decision on this report depends on the results of that detail? Like,
That's it, right there.
I mean, I feel like there's not enough in those paragraphs for me to be like, yeah, this is great. Because it sounds great, but I don't know logistically how it's gonna work in order to have an opinion or make a decision.
well, what about going back to, we each go back to our boards and look at that in as much a concrete way as we can?
So how do we do that? Like, how?
What does that
What-
mean?
Yeah, see, I'll give you an example of what it would mean, is Title I services, and I'm gonna ask Lyle to speak to the question some people have asked, well, or made statements that it's gonna jeopardize our Title I funding, and it isn't. But what it's gonna allow us to do is, schools right now like Vernon and Dummerston that don't qualify for Title I schools, as Title I schools, so they don't get the benefit of Title I funding for the remedial programming. We use some of the federal money, Title IIA, to shift to those schools. But by being a consolidated district, one example would be with Title I services, that money can be utilized for those students that meet the threshold within Dummerston and Vernon. They don't have to be Title I schools. We, as a unified district, then can decide we're gonna shift that money to those.
And do we know do we know how much it'll cost to implement all of these programs, and do we know that that money is enough to do that?
Well, we know we have the money, and, you know,
That won't change.
So-
I don't know, I feel like we're guessing.
So, not for Title I. Okay. For Title I, the money we receive as a supervisory union is based on every student in our sort of catchment area.
Right.
So whether the student is presently in a Title I school or not, it includes kids in independent schools. So we count all those kids. Any of those kids that are eligible for free and reduced lunch count toward our total.
But we know that that money is enough to cover all these programs? How do we know that?
We don't know that.
They wouldn't cover all these programs, but it would allow for additional services.
Like how much though?
How much
I
money
don't
more
know.
would come in? That's the.
Yeah, I
No more money will go in and no more money will be lost. Because our Title I funds are based on the total number of free and reduced children in our SU.
But
Every
wow.
single year it fluctuates.
That money is spent now, say, in the Brattleboro towns, on Title I teachers, right? Isn't that where we largely spend the money?
Most of it goes to salaries, but as Rhonda said, schools like Vernon and Dummerston, we put Title IIA money into those positions. So academic supports positions there would be, are paid for with Title IIA money. That would shift somewhat, so that there would be more money possibly going to Title I salaries.
Okay, so just to.
Can I maybe I can help with this, I don't know, maybe I'll make them up to that. But from what I'm hearing them say, when it comes to Title I services, in a consolidated district, there'll be more flexibility from the superintendent's office to put the services to the kids that need it the most. Where right now, they have some limitations to that services. There's no more money, it's the same amount of money, but right now, a whole lot of it can go to schools that are Title I identified schools, even though there's Title I kids that need Title I services in schools that aren't identified, and they can't spend the money there. But if we are a unified district, they would be able to spend that money there. So it just gives greater flexibility within this example of how giving the kids that need the services the most.
And that's great, Ricky. What you said is exactly right, and that's what I've always thought we were talking about for something that, to me, is one of the clearest issues, Title I, and moving people around. The one that, what I think Beth is getting at, and what I was getting at mentally, is the other stuff that's not Title I. The foreign languages, bringing the behavioral specialists, the health teachers, whatever we were just brainstorming, talking about in the smaller group. What does that cost? And I understand that we have a time frame. I understand that we want to be broad for this write-up. But I'm not, perhaps to speak real bluntly here, I'm not real interested personally in putting together a document that gets to pass muster if we don't know what those figures are. That we can actually say to people in all of our towns, Guilford, you're going to get behavioralists that you don't have now, and your taxes, eventually it's going to cost us another $200,000 throughout the supervisory union, so split out proportionally, it'll be roughly $50,000 more,
So
whatever.
What we talked about in our small group is asking central office to give us a few examples. I thought we talked about foreign language, I don't know.
Behavior.
So, didn't we do that? So we can actually look at, obviously we don't want to ask them to create an entire budget because that's a huge amount of time, but at least in several categories. And I think that's probably something you can do. so sort of is that correct? Sort of look at the very least, foreign language, because that seems to be one people really care about.
I think it's foreign language and behaviors were the ones we identified, right, that were probably the biggest
Well, the
staff intensive.
behaviorist has already been incorporated in the fiscal year 17
we talked
budget,
about
so that's sort of a non-issue.
Not equally.
Here's a problem with what you're asking.
Yeah.
When we consolidated special ed, we didn't anticipate that we'd save $300,000. But we did. And so as a result, we're continuing, as we have to, when we put budgets together this year, and now thinking, okay, so doesn't it make sense to fund, those behavior intervention technicians that are paras in the SU budget as opposed to the individual district budgets? So we're creating a more uniform system, we're creating a program that is gonna be accessible to all the schools, and it's gonna be gradual. It's probably gonna take a 3-year period before every school has a certified behavioral interventionist along with the support staff that they need. So, for some of this, I don't know how we show this year or the next year, but we can show examples like that. The other thing I would do is we're looking at other districts that have successfully done this and said, okay, so what have you seen as benefits in these areas? So that's what we can do. And, between now and June 7th or whatever it is, that timeframe, I don't know. But
I just think that's what people are gonna wanna know, and they're gonna look to us to answer, because we're on the study committee. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know, it sounded good on paper, but I don't know how it's gonna work.
So along with that, then we look at the financial models and say, okay, so here's some tax savings as well. So we know there's gonna be some operational efficiencies that we can identify, not a huge amount of money, but $40,000 in one audit, other things like that. We can create a list of those things. But it's a combination of that, better services for kids, and then the tax implications.
So guys, it's 6:45. How about Amy, and then why don't we move on to representation, is that all right?
So one of the things that and maybe, I don't know if this will give you any comfort, I'm a very fact and number-based person. And I see this worksheet as more of an overarching vision that we can all agree on. And I know from serving on the board that when issues like this have come up, it really isn't the board's job to program. We take the overarching vision and we give it to our staff or the building principal and say, here's the money that the taxpayers have provided you with, here is our guideline budget, the programs that we've talked about in the past, and we want you to implement this kind of thing. And I see that as sort of this process, and I think we can give the taxpayers examples of, okay, well, it's gonna be this much for salary for a foreign language teacher and benefits, and we see this type of expense being phased in over, an X many years. I think we could give them that kind of example, but until we, central office really gets, their teeth into it, they're really, not gonna have the nitty-gritty details for
And it. that's my concern, is being tasked with making the decision without all of that information. That's what concerns me, is that we have to make a decision on this kind of high-level, sounds good document. We think it might work, it has worked somewhere else, but we don't really know the details, but yet we have to make this really important decision without taking the time to get into it. That's my concern.
Well, having gone up to Montpelier with Lyle and Frank and Ron, and met with Rebecca Holcomb and then the other folks up there back at the very beginning of this process, they felt that we were in a very good position to look at, consolidating, just because we had so much more unity in terms of programs and services. And having been doing this as long as I have, we've been fighting budgets and budget constraints for the entire 12 years I've done this. And I really don't think that the children have suffered in Dummerston because of that. I mean, granted, we have not been able to give them a foreign language instruction, dedicated program that we would have liked to. We weren't able to hire a technology person, but, our staff and our central office are creative enough and forward-thinking enough that they can make things happen, that are advantageous to the kids, without, making the taxpayers want to move away. So I have faith in them, and I think if you look at the outcomes, from around the state, and then you compare within the district, I think
I just don't want to be the one to say, you have to have faith when I go to town meeting. Yeah.
no, we would support it, oh, no, I don't, I mean,
Yeah, can we let,
Yeah.
we're getting tight, thank you,
Yep.
Amy, have a Frank.
Yeah, and maybe, I know you're looking for the specifics, and I think we can develop that. But in the spirit of what Amy just described, makes the most sense, where this committee sets the vision, and then we provide you with programming that says we're gonna, the outcomes that you're looking for are doable with this structure. So, but an example of, I think what you're looking for, and you will see down the road, is you take the STEP program that we've been talking about. No individual autonomous small school has the resources to invest in the specialist with the amount of skill that it takes to essentially restructure the program that exists. So Guilford's not going to do that on their own, Vernon's not going to do that on their own, Dummerston's not going to do that on their own. But collectively, when you have one employer saying, we have seen these models have a substantial effect, this group the legislature is going to hear from in January, the National Research Group has the evidence that shows these are some of the initiatives that have the greatest impact on student achievement. The point is we can take those models as a central system and create the reality, and this, actually the 17 budget begins to do that, and that's just in one area of our budget. It's not even a majority area of our budget. So the point is that as we talk about this, if the committee wants to move forward, we can take these programs that are known to have a very significant impact on learning, we can put them into the executable models like you see every day with your budgets, your local budgets. Here's the resource, here's the personnel, and here's the outcome that we expect, here's the cost. So, and it's...
So you're saying you will be able to do some numbers for us?
The key is that the group has the visions that we can say, oh, here's your vision, yeah, here's a program that will meet your vision, and then it's either we'll look at our own experience at some of our systems, like Academy School, we've used that example many times, where you have a high degree of poverty and an exceptional outcome. We'll say, well, what happened there? Can we replicate that in Vernon, Guilford, Dummerston? And the answer is yes, as a group, a consolidated single employer. But you can't do it if you're a bunch of autonomous units that say, that's a different contract, that's a different board, that's a different tax impact, and so on. Another very simple example is a facility manager. None of us have the resources to hire the individual at Guilford School who understands the engineering behind the control systems that monitor and open up dampers and so on, turn boilers on, turn boilers off. So we call the specialist. But if we had enough resources from a centralized point of view, we'll see this in Mount Mansfield, we'll see this in other systems where there's a payback on that kind of a investment. And those are easier sort of analogies to make, but you can extend that into regular instruction.
It might be really useful, though, to take one example, and if language is already the one that's been identified as one example of something that we could do as a district that we're not doing now, based upon the ways in which schools that are using it, if there's a way in which the union, supervisory union, could come up with a model that would allow us to go to our boards and to the community to say, this is just one example, and it's not quite faith and hypothetical, but it is one we understand there are variables. but based upon what we're already doing, this is how it might unfold if we spread it out across all schools in the district, in the future district.
I know you wanna move on, but, and I have to be the wet blanket here, because to be really blunt, Academy has it, Green School, Green Street, Oak Grove, we have a lot of these programs. And I know our taxpayers have listened hard. We had 5 hours on our budget a couple of years ago. And the reason that our taxpayers have approved our budget is because they see the results. And so for us to be able to go in front of our boards and say, okay, so now, and I'm not saying that, I want all of the schools and all of the kids in our area to have those same things. But our voters are going to want to know, what does it mean to us? We are already paying for 58%, I think we are, something of the, so what does that mean? And we're already getting those questions.
And so this is, you don't think that this will address that?
Richards is better than what we had before for floating through here. But it's still, it needs to be hard data. And
Yeah.
And just on the surface, that's where the state recognized that. They recognize the larger system that's generally the lower cost provider needs an incentive to join in a larger system, and that is where those tax incentives that we saw on the financial model, as you saw the last time we looked at that, and you see in your handout, Brattleboro still has a measurable savings. It's not as great as Dummerston and Putney's, but it's a savings.
Right, but that examples don't put in any numbers for making these programs equitable all the way out. And our town has consistently voted for those programs, thinking that we're getting results.
So we are talking about the merger, the accelerated merger financial model. Can we table this and touch base on it later? Because we only have an hour left. Okay, is that all right?
Yeah, I just
Because
wanna make sure it was clear.
that's a financial, yeah.
Yeah, will we touch, I mean, so we're running out of time, my concern is that we're running out of time to table it, so like,
Well, I think we've heard that everyone seems to, so every time we talk about this, we're refining what we would like.
okay.
And I actually thought we were starting with what Richard suggested, but we're asking them, and I think this is ultimately what Frank was planning on giving to us. He's just now hearing it a lot. But I think he's going to give us as firm numbers as he can. We're going to create this report, and he's going to do everything he can to help us justify moving forward in this way if we decide to go forward, right? So our first job is to create the report, and then we need to justify it, right? So I don't think we will lose track of that, because we're all going to be prepared, have to be prepared if we vote for this, to justifying it to people who are very skeptical, right?
Yeah.
So I think we all need to be on the same page. So, sound good? Skepticism still.
It's just a semantic thing, but I think it's the same. I thought part of the report was these types of numbers. I didn't realize that the report was gonna be this vague.
Okay.
I see the report as one thing that we have to do just to get it in, and then I see the specifics, what we'll be working on.
But you're almost making it sound like we're sending in the report without knowing the numbers?
And it makes it hard to decide to send in the report without the justification. I mean, the idea of justifying it later, I think we justify it
I
along the
can't
way.
do that. I didn't think we were.
Well, I think the report will. I think, when we
Yeah, no,
get
that's-
to number 5,
Yeah.
it's clear. There are financial benefits.
And so we will talk about those. Okay?
Sorry.
We just have to keep going in order to then come back. Proportional representation, options 1 and 2. Ricky, do you want to talk to us about? So, same sort of thing, we met as a small group, went pretty well. Ricky, do you want to explain this to us?
I will try to. So when we met as a small group last week, we looked at 2 different potential ways that in the consolidated union district, what the board might look like. So we looked at it, and I had thrown up a suggestion or a vision and kind of basing it on what the high school board does. which is basically a 9-member board, and it's on this handout that just came out tonight, or in the email, excuse me. So it's a 9-member board, and it's based on population, so 5 from Brattleboro, 1 each from Dummerston, Guilford, Putney, Vernon, to make the 9. We also looked at and talked about the possibilities of having an ex officio or alternate non-voting members, which would bring us up to like 13 if everyone's there, and the goal is that everyone would be there. But if somebody couldn't be there, so it'd still be 5 from Brattleboro and 2 from each one of the outlying other towns. And then I threw out the suggestion of an 11-member board, which is on the far right in that chart that came out in the email. And in that one, it'd still be 5 from Brattleboro because it'd be based on population, and then essentially 1.5 from each one of the alternate. And I'm not cutting people in half, but I did it based on geographics and based on what the House does on the state level, in that there would be basically 1 from Vernon, 1 from Guilford, and 1 from Guilford Vernon, 1 from Dummerston, 1 from Putney, and 1 from Dummerston Putney, to bring us to an 11-member board
How would you vote that?
configuration, huh?
How would you vote that?
Well, same way that the House, they vote for the House members from those same towns right now on the state level. The
So they
town,
have some
the
experience.
town clerks in theory know how to do that. So that would happen. So the voters in Vernon and, using Vernon and Guilford as an example, the voters in Vernon and Guilford, when they went to vote for their representatives, they would vote for 1 just from Vernon, if you were from Vernon, and 1 that would be Vernon, and they would figure that out.
And Ricky, what was your idea of why would you want to do?
Well, because one of the reasons why I liked the idea of the far right one of 11 members is, one, is that 11 brings more people to the table to have a discussion, and I think that we felt in a small group, and those of you that were there, please chime in if you think I'm wrong, but I feel like we felt like we wanted to give some more representation to the outlying towns. So that in theory, if we went with what the BUHS board does is now for that configuration of 9, and it's never happened in all the years that I've been on the BUHS board when it's been 9, but in theory the Brattleboro representatives could get together and do basically whatever they want and not let the outlying towns have a voice. This would, in either one of the other 2 possibilities, give but mostly the far right one, give the outlying towns the more opportunity to have a voice and not get bullied, for lack of a better word. So it just gives more representation to those smaller towns, outside of Brattleboro. So that's why I like the 11, and I also feel like the 11, things happen. And tonight's a good example. Not everyone's here tonight. Not everyone could be here tonight. If there's 11 members, if 9 members, if there's not enough people sitting around the table, you might not have a quorum to make decisions. And I feel like, depending on what this looks like, we're gonna need to have enough people that can make decisions every single time we sit down and have a meeting. There can't be a time when we're not making a decision, that we don't have the ability to make a decision if it needs to be done.
Matt or Amy, do you want to, there were 4 of us in that meeting who are here, so do you want to add?
The only concern that I had about the 11 member was whether it meets the requirements of the proportionality or the weighted.
Yeah, and we really weren't sure about that, but
Yeah.
we thought that.
So, and then the numbers in there, they're sort of off the top of our heads, so they may or may not be right. They were just there for examples.
Well,
Not the census stuff, no.
Of what number?
The dollar numbers.
Yes, I think Brattleboro, actually, I think the chair gets more money.
Yes.
I think I
You
do,
get-
but I
yes,
don't
you
really.
get-
So we wanted to
Wait.
at least illustrate that, there's a potential savings there as well,
Do you want to add anything, Matt?
No.
No, you're good. So, can you wait a sec?
Yeah.
Kim, because you've talked a lot.
I know. I'll shut up. Give me a cookie. Shut up.
Christina?
I just had a proportionality question
Yeah.
because the outlying towns have more votes and less people, so I'm not. I'd be
Yeah,
surprised. I like that formula better, but I'd be surprised if it meets the criteria.
So,
Yeah, I don't think that works proportionality-wise.
So just so we know, the maximum number of school directors is 18. Each member forming the school district is entitled to have at least 1 school director, and variations in proportionality of 10% or less, 10% or more is generally problematic. So I think we're within the 10%, but we'd have to look at it.
You say more people, it has fewer people in your vote?
All the outlying towns together have fewer people than Brattleboro, but we would have more votes.
Yeah, because it adds up to 6.
Yeah.
And we have
Yeah.
8,000, a population of roughly 8,500, and Brattleboro's population is 12,000.
Right.
But the outlying towns would have 6 votes,
Right.
Brattleboro would have 5.
Yeah, and I don't know how BUHS, do you remember, Amy, how the BUHS numbers worked into that? So I
I didn't write them down, I knew you were doing the math at that meeting, and
BUHS numbers for.
well, student numbers are popular, I mean, we're not supposed to, obviously, we go from town to town, but I am wondering if student numbers have anything to do with it.
No,
Okay.
this was all census.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why the BUHS census number was 0, because it's included in the other stuff, so.
And also to know that we're dealing, the only numbers that we have to deal with as far as for proportionality is from the 2010 census, so we're dealing with something that's almost 6 years old at this point for number wise, but that's the only thing we got.
Francasti was more recent by town,
Okay.
so it fits this.
Yeah.
It's pretty similar. So I would suggest that, I mean, I really like the fact that it's a manageable number and the good representation for the smaller town. I guess I think we just have to review this with the legal consultant, and they're gonna tell us.
And that's what we thought about in the small committees, we just needed to double check stuff with legal, but, you know, and I wanna say too, and we talked about this a little bit at the small committee meeting, when the BUHS board was 17 members, I was on that board for a short period of time, because I got appointed to fill in for somebody who needed to leave for medical reasons, so my first meeting was our first of 2 meetings in September that year. That was my first meeting, and then there was an election, the vote in March to shrink the size of that board. And in that 6 months, I never missed a meeting, and there was board members I never met. Because they were never there.
We would have
Yeah.
a lack of quorum
All the
every other
time.
meeting.
Because everyone thought somebody else was gonna be there. So when I saw in the original documents as a plan is like no more than 18, I was like, we don't wanna get anywhere near that. Because then you have this, like, oh, there's gonna be enough other people there, I don't need to worry about going. And it also became, the meetings that when there was a lot of people there, and Ron, you and I were both sitting at those tables, sometimes there was like discussions that it went on for 15 hours and we didn't get anywhere. You know, because everyone was talking, you know, so.
Kim, Mark, or Beth, do you have anything to add?
Now, when you're talking about the 10%, I might be doing too simple of a math. But if we have 58% if Brattleboro has 58%, and obviously, like Ricky said, this is 2010 data. If we have 5% of the vote, 5 votes, that's only 45% of the votes. And that's that's more than 10% difference. And again, my math is very simple, it's just.
My gut's telling me that the 11 member board is not gonna fly legally, but we'll see.
Well,
The 11 member one with the at-large members, I don't know them. No, I'm just saying my gut
Oh,
is
you don't
telling me
think,
that.
oh, I see.
Because of those type of issues,
Yeah.
yeah.
well,
But we can see.
we can talk about the 13 too. I mean, we're
Right.
exploring everything right now, so
It's just a question.
Yeah.
Why are we using census data as opposed to student numbers?
that's what the act requires.
And is there a reason I mean, I like the 11 number, I think it's a great solution, but if we can't do it, why can't we do 10 and just have one at-large person voted across 4 towns?
Aren't you supposed to be on?
I mean, if we're doing one person across 2 towns, right?
But,
Why couldn't we do one person across?
I mean, I think, I guess in theory we could, I think that the goal was to keep it an odd number so that there was not a divided board.
So Kim, what do you think about 13 versus the 11?
I think you still, no, but they're non-voting members.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes, 5-4.
I mean, then you don't have the, then we don't have the proportionality issue. If 4 of those, 1 from each town, are non-voting.
But they have the larger voice, I mean.
Right,
they have a
but
voice at the
they have a
table.
voice at the table,
Yeah.
which is what you want.
Yeah, so.
Christina?
My algebra's not.
Another question.
Okay.
So this is the way the board would be. Did you guys also discuss what we've heard thrown around of the individual towns still keeping some sort of an advisory board and what role they might have?
We didn't, and I think that would be worth, I mean, we touched on it very basically, but that certainly is a conversation that I think could happen in a smaller group setting to come up with some.
I wondered about the money specifically.
I think we're assuming that those positions would not be paid, but I don't know, that's another discussion, right? So how do you want to move forward on discussing this further? It's now 7:08.
Well, I think we need to clarify the 11-member, whether it's a feasible option, and if it's not, and there, if somebody's got some creative options, other options, that fit the constraints. Otherwise, we look at the 9 or the 13.
Okay. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that makes the most sense. Like, let's see what the legal consultant says about whether or not the 11 would fly. But, I mean, I think that as long as we don't get too big, I think we're gonna be okay, and we can figure out, but we can be respectful and appropriate and make sure that everybody's voices are heard. And I think I think we have the experience to do that within the district, between the high school board and also the WSESU board. I mean, I think between both those things, we have that experience so that we can do that as communities. But however it works out, I was just trying to figure out the way that we could do this the most equitably.
Mark?
I had one to maintain the 11. That would be to, we have eliminated BAMs and we eliminated the high school. Why not reincorporate them and give them each one vote or one member? And because they would have the responsibility of working with meshing people from all districts together. So they may bring a unique insight into the general board. So if you put them back in, one for BAMs and one for the high school, you have your 11 members. And then
So you're talking about like an at-large person that could be from any one of the 5 towns?
Any one of the 5 towns, but specifically assigned to the unique problems of middle school and a high school.
And what about
But how do you go about voting for that?
I think that happens afterwards, and when you do subcommittees, then you'd have like what we have now, or committee and
Yeah, because on the high school board now, just so everybody's aware, like we have the high school board of 9 members, but then each one of those board members has to sit on at least three committees. And for instance, I'll use myself as an example. I sit on the planning and policy committee, which does all 3 of the schools that we represent. I also sit on the teacher curriculum committee, which basically does curriculum related things mostly for the high school. And then we have a BAMS committee, which does just BAMS. And then we also have a Wyndham Regional Career Center committee. That's just a committee for them. Right. And so we, like the BAMS committee is made up of the Guilford rep on the board, the Vernon rep on the board, myself, and then we have an alternate from Brattleboro also. And we sit down with the principal on a regular, at least once a month, and discuss issues that are going on with BAMS. And I think I envisioned it more of breaking it down that way with like, where are people's interests once people are on this new configured board, whether it's 9, 13, or 11. Okay, where are people's interests to do different things?
And that may serve the ex officio role where a person is on the board that would like to serve on a subcommittee. Sure. To be very knowledgeable and advocating for that, and then report back to the board.
That works for me.
Kim?
Go back to 11.
Well, and the other thing, if we wanted to do more, and you all might have already discussed this, but if you did 13 and gave Brattleboro 7, and then everybody has 1.5 votes, all the other towns. So it'd be 13 voting members.
So you're talking about using essentially the 11 model, but having it be
Right.
7, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5,
Yes.
1.5 to bring us to 13.
And then then the smaller towns do get more voting.
But it's not any different than the 9.
Right.
You're still 5 and 4, you just be
Right,
7
you
and 6.
still get proportionality, and legally then we meet that standard. But then the smaller towns do have, they have another voice, but they also have some more voting as well.
And how do you count a vote of 1.5?
That's the
How do you vote?
Putney Dummerston one.
Yeah, Putney Dummerston.
Yeah.
They would have to agree on something, like two people?
So you'd have one person for Dummerston, Vernon, Guilford, and Putney.
And then there'd be
And
one
then there'd
person
be
representing
one
Dummerston,
Dummerston,
Putney.
Putney, one Vernon, Guilford person.
So there would be 6 voting members.
They wouldn't cast
For the
2 half
force.
votes, they'd cast 1 solid.
Yeah.
vote.
Yeah,
Be one person.
One
Plus
person
another
from 2 towns.
Yeah,
yes.
represent.
I'd be interested in hearing your opinion. The 3 of you. Is that all right?
Yeah, I mean, I like the 11 and 13. I probably think the 13 is probably gonna cut the mandate, the requirements. Frank has some experience in Newbrook, where Newfane and Brookline merged, and there's a weighted vote mechanism, so I wanna explore that as well and bring it back to this group.
And that worked well. Initially, it seemed a little foreign because no one had ever done it, but the idea was there was 5 board members in the Newfane school, and then there was 3 board members in the Brookline school, and essentially nobody wanted to get off the board. They all wanted to be participants in the merged school, and so everyone showed up at the board meetings, and we went through this discussion and legal opinion on proportional voting, and it is as simple as following the law around the representation requirements, and then assigning a weighted number to each member. So in this case, doing that same concept with a board of 11, I just did this, you probably did the same math, just 11 times that column you have over there in column C, the census data. You know, so it would be, you could have 11 members, and you could have an agreement as an entity, a legal entity. 6.3 is the Brattleboro representation of 58 times, 58% times 11 is 6.3, and Dummerston would be a 1. Guilford would be a 1, it could be a 1.1, it's right there at the margin of the 10% variance. Putney would be a 1.4, and Vernon would be the 1.2, and there's your weighted vote. It adds up to 11. You have 11 people, and literally when you do votes in that context, the clerk just has a quick sheet, and you add up the votes, and it was not at all difficult to administer. And from that point of view, I think that the 11 in the representation, the number of folks able to represent the community, is a desirable model. It's worked well at VHS. It's been tested all these years. I think it's fine.
My only question is if the at-large from Dummerston and Putney, if there would be any way to put in some kind of rotation so that we sometimes have 2 people from Putney and 1 from Dummerston, and another time it would be 2 people from Dummerston, 1 from Putney, and the same with Guilford and Vernon, so that the at-large somehow shifts.
Or it can
After a
only be
number
the
of
people
years.
that live on the borderline.
Well, changing population may do that for you.
And I'll say I really do like the sort of at-large, because I think it allows us to share information. It creates a unified approach in a way we haven't done before, and I like that approach.
So we have a number picked, I think that's 11. Do we really need a rationale as to why?
Yes.
No.
So the reason we're having this discussion is that it was pretty clear from Donna and that this is contested. And so we need it to be clarified legally before ideally it simplifies things, simplifies the process. So do we want to ask Ron to pursue whether this option is legally feasible? Or do we want to give him a couple of things to look at, a couple of
And what is this, the weighted or?
Well, you tell,
My first reaction, based on the conversation I'm hearing tonight, is I think that most people are feeling like 11 in some configuration is good. Maybe it's checking out to see legally what we can do to have an 11-member board. And whether that's 11 members the way it's been described in this piece, on this piece of paper that we got as an email, or is it's in a weighted system, or whatever it is, it seems like, and if everybody thinks I'm not right, or disagrees, but it seems like from the discussion tonight, that the desire is to have an 11-member board.
Yeah?
So how about we just confer with legal about whatever, what do we need to do to make
options
it
are available?
available to make it an 11-member board? Whether it's like this, whether it's weighted, whether it's a 7 and whatever, you know, however.
Sounds good?
And this is part of our grant money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone in agreement on that? Yeah?
How about that?
Yeah? No, okay.
Decision.
Well, there's too many Tristan-phobics in the room, so
All
we're
right.
going to.
Okay, so guys, it's 7:18. We have to do district property, which I don't think will take very long, and then accelerated merger financial option. Okay? And then questions. So we aren't gonna have enough time to do everything we wanna do. So let's just be aware of that.
We didn't talk about the other part of that, the individual schools. Do we come back to that, or?
I think we'd come back to that. You mean the,
Advisory group?
yeah. So,
I just had this wacky idea going through my head, whether we wanted, one of the things that's coming out of this is good, is that we talk more about things amongst ourselves like this. And I had originally thought it would be a study, an advisory group from Brattleboro or from Putney or whatever. Does it make sense that maybe there's grouped by age?
Why what?
By age?
Age?
Yeah, like the first, second, third graders, and so it might be, well, it's a wacky idea.
The concept, when I first talked to the Secretary of Education was, so how do we make sure that small schools, smaller districts will have less representation? How do you advocate for them? So I suggested this school-based council, which they said, oh yeah, that would be great. And what I had in my mind is the representative from that town, or representatives, along with the principal, along with parents, community members, you know. It's kind of like a PTO, but would meet on a regular basis and, you know, talk about school issues and advocate for that school. And the representatives and the principals, obviously, that we work with, the principals very closely, are, you know, advocating for their particular schools. So I think, I would hope that you do it by school. We have that other mechanism in terms of our teaching staff, where we do grade level meetings, and, you know, that's important professionally. So.
We have to get to it sometime.
no, I think we should, and I would suggest that we do it in a smaller group. You know, we don't have to, but I do think that that's an issue that might really address a lot of people's concerns about representation and having a voice in the process. So if we could talk about that in another.
Maybe
is
your
that,
small group can meet again.
yes. Or, yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So can we ask Frank to talk to us? Do we have specific questions, or do you have something to present?
Nothing, what was the outcome?
I was hoping that we would do the financial model again.
Okay.
And kind of look at some variations, because it's come up at this group, and then we've used it at a couple of board meetings. We did the forum in Dummerston. Not all boards have really had a chance to see it, but I think there's been questions that have come up, and I think we can, I don't know that we answered all the questions or questions I had when we looked at this, and I think it's important that we're very clear about what this model really shows.
Sounds good?
Okay, fire it up. Do you want to take a minute in your transition topic, taking notes? Okay, so we'll fire up this financial model. We can talk about a couple more scenarios, help clarify some of the some of the sort of the default consequences of doing nothing and or choosing the accelerated path that we have decided to apply for. We can also look at a couple of different house values, because I think that has come up in some general discussions.
I want to make sure we talk about the 4-year model and what the 5% limitation does as well.
Good, yes, okay. All right, so I think we've probably spent enough time on the inputs, right? Did everyone have a chance? So everybody had a chance to observe that at our last meeting. Any questions on inputs that I need to revisit? Okay. So on the outputs, a quick refresher. Oh, a nice little podium, look at that. That's what we need, thank you. Much better. What happened there? Can people see that? Is there a... It's kind of tiny. Well, let's blow this thing up a little bit. And then we move it over a little bit. We're in the center. Got a little wobble in the screen there. I can go over to the other side of the table if we need to. We'll also speak to it. So this is what you have in a handout. So you've seen this data before. What we didn't emphasize so much is the difference between the 5-year accelerated and the 4-year.
Let me go to Vern just as an example.
Okay.
Can we make it any bigger?
Yeah.
Do you want the lights out? Can we pull the projector back?
Yeah, we need an extension cord to go further.
You know what Vernon is at, excuse me?
Yeah.
Can you zoom it in?
Needs more text, but
Okay, so here's the Vernon. Here's the Vernon scenario, and you would see this in your document. The do nothing scenario, just a reminder, is at the top. It's saying we're currently operating under $1.67 tax rate, and those folks with a $300,000 house in Vernon are paying $5,035 because we don't have the opportunity to implement in 2017. We're not seeing any difference between do nothing scenario and the accelerated, because the accelerated doesn't go into effect until fiscal year 18. So that's what you see here, okay? But under this scenario, the do nothing model in either case, we see this tax rate increase based on the historical, the input data that we put in, which says our student enrollment has been declining and our spending has been growing by those factors we talked about. So what we didn't look at carefully was, well, what happens between the 5-year accelerated versus we are not successful in moving forward because of whatever reason. Here's the different impact between the 5-year accelerated and the 4-year path. So you see $534 difference against the do nothing versus a savings of $335. So it's a lower benefit, but it's still a benefit. And you see how that plays out over the period of time. If we just look at another town, right?
Just quick,
Sure.
especially for viewers. So the $1.67 number, would that be with the phase out gone in theory? Is that, you know what I'm saying, the 25% discount? Is that a number with that already factored out, or are you?
The $1.67 is where we're at right now. If we look at our town reports, and we should see $1.67 school tax.
Okay.
And we are 17 is going to be the first year of the phase out. And that's a good question. I don't know if this model incorporated freezing that as it is with the 25% discount, or if it said
If it's ranked out, or
if it goes
it'd be
through.
helpful to find out long term.
That's a good question. Yeah. Was that significant?
Sorry.
Yeah. So it goes along with the choice and having the power plant in Vernon. Vernon for all of these years has been paying 25% less than the rest of the state on their statewide property tax for schools.
So is there another disincentive in the 4-year model about the 5% issue?
What's factored into this, and it might be a little more apparent in, let's look at Dummerston. What's factored into this is a provision in the law that says if you go with a 5%, if you go with the 5-year accelerated model, it doesn't matter how high you are above the alternative, which is the unified system. You will come down to the unified system rate all in one swoop. There's no like floor that you can't go any further down in terms of a tax rate decline, or if you're a town that is below the norm, the unified norm. So if this is a tax rate and you're down here, it says, oh, we are going to put the brakes on, so you won't. Nobody will see more than a 5% increase. Okay, but it's really Dummerston, Putney, to some extent Vernon, where you will get a much greater benefit in the 5-year accelerated model, because they won't stop you at, oh, you've saved 5% now, you're not going any below. That stop is pulled out in the 5%. You go to the maximum benefit of a savings.
So that's what the accelerated, and the conventional gives you the 5%.
That's right, the conventional puts a stop.
And that's built into this?
And that is built into this, yes. And so Dummerston, being a town with the current highest tax rate, has the most to gain from a strictly financial incentive modeling. So we see, if you were thinking a comparison again, just really quickly, you put the Vernon and way down in the B's here, so I won't go all the way down that list, but remember that tax rate, $1.67, right, is where we started with right here. We're $1.74, significantly higher, and that just has to do with the budget and the number of kids and the school funding formula that derives these numbers. Dummerston, we know, was right up at the $17,000 cost per student threshold. It was our higher number, and that relates again to when did the enrollment dip in Dummerston, what year, and to what extent were we able to adjust through staffing and or program. So what we're illustrating is the 5-year, on a percentage basis, the difference between $1,000 and $700 is a large percentage basis, right? That's where this 5% stop it is available here. You're not limited to how much you can save, but you are here. So are there other questions that we can help with?
Let's do a $200,000.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we look at a $200,000 home value that folks are paying these $3,400 or $3,500, $3,700, $4,000 with this 2% decline in enrollment and a 2% increase in spending. These are the projected tax rates, not putting in additional cost if the system said, oh, it's going to take us time to ramp up the foreign language program, or the savings that we're anticipating from a number of efficiencies that we've seen other systems when they unify have achieved. So this is just kind of a static. Let's not make any assumptions about the future other than what is codified in the tax rate, the law, Act 46.
So are these numbers going to be available to people when they're on the study committee with different home values in there?
We can print this out if you like, yeah.
Or you can give us them all.
I would if I was authorized, but I've not been authorized to do
Giving you
it.
options, that's all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one of the times we all need to look at this is probably during our community forums that we were talking about in January, and I know Frank had nothing else that he wanted to do in January but to come to each one of our community forums.
Exactly right.
Good thing there's no snow.
So it's interesting if you do a tally on just Dummerston at 200,000
Yeah.
and do nothing, and the difference between the 2018 tax of 4,024 and 5 years later, the 5294. So you do that math, you're saving $1,000.
Yeah, 12, 13.
It's going up 1,000.
Yeah, about 1,300, yeah.
And then compare it to those 5 years, 566 to 673. So those are concrete numbers of what you'll save.
You're avoiding, yeah, in this case, here you're pointing out that the tax bill over this period of time would increase, by $1,300 approximately. Here, the tax bill would increase by about $500. So again, a ratio is that, those are significant ratios in terms of impact. And this is from the point of view where some folks will tell us, certainly tell people like me, taxes are too high to start with. So any increase is too much and they'd rather see a decrease. But, that's not up to me.
I think I asked this before, but I don't remember what the answer was. What happens in year 2023?
Yeah, so this model is set up to show the phase-in where you see where we don't see any difference down here, no dollar change, because the 10-cent impact hits here. This is 8 cents, this is 6 cents, this is 4 cents, this is 2 cents. So it's substantially, the incentive is substantially removed at that point. So in 2023, there's that 2 cent adjustment that would be felt, but it's nothing compared to the scale of what we might see if we do nothing. Because you see these numbers are 15 cents,
Right.
and then here's more than or another 15 cents. And more than that. So the expectation of this legislation is that not only will it improve educational opportunity and programming that the small schools in particular have a difficult time to fund, but it will bring down the total system cost the way we've seen it with the special ed centralization. Any other questions or scenarios that I can illustrate? Another town anybody want to look at?
Do you want to look at your?
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to do is just see, hypothetically speaking, if you were to change the input assumptions, what does that do? Like I think we're assuming a 2% decline, what happens if it's only a 1% decline?
Sure, let's look at that.
And I think Guilford was actually the lowest benefit.
It is because to some extent it's a reflection of having had the small schools, but this illustrates small schools coming out, losing the small schools grant. But it's also to some extent sort of the I don't know how to attribute the fact that the high cost that many communities have seen, like Huntley is seeing it this year, of an intensive special education program investment that's required because of a particular circumstance in a given year. That's a significant impact to all of these towns, and as we heard at our SU Finance Committee when we talked about specifically who's tuitioning out, to what extent, and the variation there, Guilford has had the benefit of not having that significant expense, so that's reflected here. So the question is, how long will that continue? What's going on? So you were saying here's Guilford, and because you are on the closer to what a unified rate might look like, you're not seeing the same differences in that. The Dummerston cost per student, equalized cost per student is about $17,000. The Guilford number is about $15,700 or $15,800, something like that. So you're already close to the system norm. If we go back to the inputs, and we look at, first maybe make a note, like $485 in this period here is a $2.24 versus a $2. That's an easy number to remember, $2. So we go back to the input, and we change our student drop to 1%, and we look at our output in that same period. There's still a benefit, but it is not as great because we're saying the same issue we struggle with every year. Oh, we've got kind of a fixed cost in our budget of about $3 million, and if we had 300 kids, that's $10,000 a kid. If we go down to 200 kids, all of a sudden our cost per student goes way up, but we're still operating the bus, the principal, the building, the core of the educational program. So when you go from 2% decline to 1% decline, that's what you're saying. We're saying, oh, we're not losing as many kids, so our cost per student is not going to decline. It's a more favorable impact on the tax rate.
But it's still 1,000.
It is as far as a favorable impact, it is still favorable, and again, from some folks' point of view, even this is from the starting point is too.
Yeah. If you actually saw an increase in students, would you start to see a negative impact?
You would, because you start fully utilizing your building, and you go from a teacher-student ratio of 10 to 15, and yes, you're gonna go back down toward the $14,000 a kid, $13,000 a kid, and then tax rates will start to come closer to $1. The further we get away from 10,000, the higher the tax rate. The further we come close to 10,000 per student, we get to $1. And they don't let you go below that.
I remember you saying at one of the last time we looked at this, that Guilford's numbers didn't look quite as favorable because of the middle school arrangement that they've got.
That's true as well. Yeah.
So if that wasn't a factor, then it would probably look a little bit.
That's a very important point. It would probably look very much like Dummerston, and actually it might even be a higher cost per student than Dummerston because we are talking about 40 students in the 7th and 8th grade at a sort of a merged rate to a transition plan for a member at the 9-12, kind of like Vernon. So this transition period, I think it was a 5-year agreement. 7-year agreement. Yeah. So that's a major favorable circumstance right now. Any other kind of questions or topics? What do you think about time, Alice?
We have 15 minutes till the end of the meeting. So we go out to long.
Well, there's a Murphy's Law, that, if you put time limits on a meeting, the meeting will extend before the time limits.
You're saying we can go now?
Well, I'm just saying.
We've had dessert.
We got more cookies.
Okay.
More questions?
Jody? Jody?
Sure, if we keep it short.
Just, how does income sensitivity figure into this formula?
Yep, so income sensitivity is an important element of the school funding law, and income sensitivity is, I think, one reason why we selected the $300,000 house is making probably, it's certainly not a scientific assumption, but assuming that folks at that level of housing and above may not be as likely to be subject to income sensitivity, but who knows? You know, I have no basis for making that. But the point is that income sensitivity is calculated in a similar way as these tax rates, in that the state announces an index. For the tax rate, it starts at $1, and then if you spend $10,000 a student, your tax rate in your community is $1. If you spend $20,000 per student, 20 divided by 10 is 2, your tax rate is $2. It's the same thing with income sensitivity. They start with 1.8% of everybody's income who's within the parameter of income sensitivity, which is less than approximately $90,000 of household income on a house and 2 acres. So they start at 1.8% of that family income. Then they say, how much do you spend more than $10,000? So if you spend $10,000, you pay 1.8% of the income with all of the exemptions and exclusions that the law provides. If we spend $20,000 per student as a school board, as a system, then you pay twice that, 3.6%. Did I do that right? Yeah, 3.6, 2 times 1.8, 3.6%. Okay, so income sensitivity is affected just like these rates are. People are going to be seeing, if you're making the $50,000 and your community was spending $15,000, then you're going to be somewhere around 3%. And if your community starts spending $20,000 because enrollment keeps declining, then you're going to be doing 3.6%, 3.7% of your income. And so there is an impact. Other questions?
We really are tight on time. I'm sorry. Can you take it to can you talk to Amy about it so that it's...
How about if nobody else has questions?
Well, we have 12 minutes left of the meeting. Okay. So no more questions for Frank? Okay. Thank you, Frank.
Okay.
I think what we're planning to do is, as individual boards meet, as part of the Act 46 discussion, we'll have these.
Yeah. So we have compiled some questions. Amy, do you want to quickly, Amy reshared your document, which you took to the Dummerston meeting. I don't know if everyone saw that, but that's a phenomenal document.
Q&A one, right?
Yeah, and thank you, Amy, that's huge. It was a draft, so I know Amy's going to tweak it a little bit. People have comments, so if anyone has comments for her really quickly, I'm sure she would be, or you can just email them to me too. And I would encourage everyone to share that with your communities if you haven't already done so.
Is this on our website already?
No, because it's a draft.
Yeah.
So it will be, yeah.
So why don't you all, I don't read it if you haven't already done so, and shoot you emails? Okay, does that make sense?
Good job.
Thank you for your hard work.
Yeah,
And
I emailed you about the board thing.
So when we get on, what's the next step?
I think once we get everybody's collective feedback, then I just be comfortable, if it's okay with
Yeah.
the committee, we would put it, contact Barb and say, put it on there.
But you don't need a vote from, you don't need.
No, I don't think so.
No, because it's just sort of a reference tool of all the compilation of all the references.
I'm going to suggest that we talk about possible work groups for a minute before we talk about the questions, just so we get it done. We talked about a small group talking, getting together to discuss the school council or whatever that is? Or shall we, we're gonna go ahead and do that, yeah? When do we wanna do that, and who, we need one representative from each group?
Before we go, are we gonna be talking because those of us that there's only one member, then we have to be at all of these subcommittees.
Well,
and that's-
I mean, you could have, I think all the small towns have one member and one,
Yeah.
so, yeah,
But you could send any board member to one of these subgroups. and
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We did that.
I mean, or we could make the next meeting longer, I don't know.
No,
That's-
I'll figure it out.
Okay, so does that make sense? Do you, it takes a while to do that via email, so I'd suggest that we pick a time right now.
Can you go through all the groups so we can kind of choose amongst ourselves?
All the, well, I don't know what other groups are there.
Right, that's what I'm wondering. I think the program group wants to talk again, from what we just talked about, or no?
I don't feel the need to, but we certainly can if we,
I think the program.
Maybe the small group doesn't need, we're just gonna meet back with Frank's figures, that's our next step on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think
Yeah,
that
I
should be
think so.
the
well, I'm sorry, are we gonna meet back with Frank on the figures now? I thought we were gonna do that at a later point.
Okay.
Yeah.
When's
Okay.
later meeting?
I think we need to
I
create a
think we're gonna
document.
present
Yeah.
that to you,
Yeah,
and I would hope by the December.
that's, what- yeah,
And it would be nine.
yes,
And it would be all
that's what I'm, yeah.
That's fine.
Yep.
So then is it only the small study group on the school advisory?
Any other groups? Because,
What else is on the
well, one
worksheet?
thing, what we didn't talk about is property.
Oh.
So I'm wondering if maybe a group wants to talk about property,
No.
or do you want to just talk to the lawyer?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's enough articles of agreement from other districts that we could just find
Look at.
those and, you know, it takes care of that stuff.
Okay.
Was there something on school choice that we needed to come back around to, or no?
No, I think we were pretty unified on that as well.
It's something we can always bring to our individual boards to see if people have concerns about.
So maybe the only one is the advisory group, maybe that, and maybe that's a quick 5 minutes right here, and you guys don't have to meet.
That's
Like
good.
that.
Yeah, what she said.
Let's do it.
Do you want to quickly talk about it
Would you agree?
now as a larger group?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on, we all gave, people gave Frank questions. We haven't, he came up with some answers, I think. I don't know if we want to move that to next time. Does that work? I think you've probably answered a lot of them right now. Does that work, everyone?
Yep.
We'll push it off?
Yep.
Okay, so just, we have about 5 to 10 minutes left. Shall we just talk about?
Sure.
Okay,
Save everybody a meeting.
which is awesome.
Yes.
So people should just, wait, does anyone other than Jill want to talk about?
I thought it was gonna pass.
What?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, time's ticking.
So I mean, I think what we already said is that what Ron was describing, do any of us think that that is wrong? Is there anything we want to add to
Would it
it?
still be elected positions, like at town meeting, sorry, at town meeting, would you still elect those people?
I think you've got your board representative who is already elected.
Right,
You've got a principal that's serving in the school.
yeah.
And then I think the other people are voluntary.
And they're not paid.
I hadn't imagined that.
And that could be parents, that could be just regular, that could be community members that aren't parents, it could be, in theory, it could be even if teachers wanted to be involved in that process, they could be involved in that process too.
Could be students.
And it could be students.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, you'd want to have at least 5 members of that council.
Right, it's some kind of formality, I guess is what I'm thinking, because if you don't have like a commitment, if it's just like a PTO, show up if you can,
Yes.
I'm afraid we won't get that participation.
Mhm.
There needs to be some type of a commitment or formality to it, I would think.
Karen?
When we lived in Connecticut, when my kids went to a school, we had a homeschool association for the Catholic school, and it was separate. It wasn't like a school board, but we were voted in by the parents of the school. and we ran meetings. So, you know, we did have some oversight, you know, just over certain aspects, but we didn't have any oversight over running of the school.
Right.
So, I mean, but we were voted in, so that's something that the individual schools could vote.
Right, so in
And we
this
had-
scenario, it would
We
be
had a
the school
president,
board
vice
that,
president, all of that.
it'd be the school board that votes in those representatives.
The school.
No, the school, actually, the parents of the
Oh, okay.
school voted.
Well, that'd be good.
Yeah,
I like
and-
that idea.
So the parents voted their representatives, the teachers could vote their representative.
I like that.
yes.
I like that
And,
too.
and we, you know, we kind of, you know, oversaw, you know, certain aspects of the school, but we didn't have anything to do with day-to-day, you know, oh, this needs to be fixed, how are we paying for that? You know, but we oversaw other aspects, you know, more of like
culture.
a PTO, you know.
Yeah.
We did have money that we had to raise as a HSA, so we oversaw that aspect of it, just, you know, for tuition and things like that, but it was voted on by the parents, and we had president, vice president, secretary, all of that, so we had levels. And then we had, you know, other parents that were part of it as well, the treasurer and everything for funds.
So, any other, would the community member, community members vote for community members? I mean, could it be on the ballot?
It's really however you wanted to do it,
Yeah.
I mean, but that, you know, it's something that, you know, just our, you know, it was a small community, it was just a, you know, a private school, so we all voted, you know, it was just the parents voting. But, you know, we did have, the principal was always at the meetings and things like that, so.
Well, if you had a 5-member school advisory committee and you made sort of the building principal and the supervisory district board representative sort of the heads of it, then it could be their responsibility to seek a representative from the staff, seek a representative from the community, you know, and fill the positions so that there's a broad representation, you know, for that.
How would the one voting member be elected, selected, chosen?
The one,
For a committee of 11, or 11,
They're gonna be
That would be,
That would be
they
elected?
normally are.
okay,
Yeah.
so it would be, all right.
Yeah.
Same way
But
there's
you
a-
say that they would hand pick, or that there would be an election for the parent representative?
I'm not saying there's an election, I don't.
I don't think you can have the principal handpick people to be a member of the committee.
I like that idea, the teachers electing the teacher, and
Yeah.
the parents
For
electing the
representation.
parent.
Right.
Is there, for schools that have middle schools and high school, would a student be a member?
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
So maybe you could have a second.
So we don't do that, I'm just thinking here, with
No.
Nathan.
And then the students in that case could vote for that, that could be the 5th member.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be a teacher, it could be a parent, it could be a student, you know, for the older students.
What does the study, or this, what are we calling this group? The advisory committee?
Advisory councilors.
What do they do? Do they get to say, and what do they get to have an opinion on, and what power do they have back to the total board?
I think, what I would see is that they are basically the voice of that school, and then they're saying to their board representative on that advisory council, like, this is the thing that we really feel strongly about, that you need to make sure you're advocating for at the board, at your next board meeting, or at the board meeting related to the budget,
So
or
give an
whatever.
example.
Well, like, for instance, I don't know, just to throw something out there, just randomly, if it was decided that, you know, that there was talk in the budget of cutting a certain program, and that the people in that school were like, no, I don't want to cut that program, then it would be up to that board representative to really advocate for the fact that this school feels really strongly about keeping this thing and not getting rid of whatever that
So if
is.
Mark is gonna log the Putney
The
Forest.
forest, right. And the Putney representative would be like, no, no, no. And Mark and the Putney rep could arm wrestle for it or whatever. Exactly.
Can I?
So can I also, like, the BAMS committee, could you give examples of, you know, some issues that come to the BAMS committee, and then, you know, you're advocating with the principal?
Well, the BAMS committee, for instance, I mean, one of the things that the BAMS committee is usually the first people involved in sitting in on hirings, like sitting on this committee, like if it's somebody, if there's a position open in BAMS, what the people in the BAMS committee are asked to be part of that search committee, to sit in on those interviews and be part of that. But also, it could be, you know, we wanted, like when the BEAMS program started, the after-school program at BAMS, the principal at the time came to the BAMS committee and said, I think I can get grant funding to do this, this is the thing that we want to do, this is what we want it to look like. And we as a committee were like, that's a great idea, if we can fund it, let's make that happen. You know, if it can get funded. And then it was the grant, and for that, using that as the example, and then when the grant came in, the grant was 100% for a while, and then it slowly needed to get phased off. And then we, as the BAMS committee, advocated to put the difference into the BUHS number 6 budget to continue to have that program because it was really important.
I'm thinking of a more nuts and bolts type of thing, and we bumped into this in the Brattleboro School Board. Let's say that Putney School is facing a meltdown of their petroleum-fired school boiler. And there's options available that you can either use a high-efficiency natural gas, or you log the Putney Forest and you shovel in wood chips. That is the kind of decision that I see the advisory council making. More so, you know, as opposed to maybe curriculum matters, which is pretty much left to our experts in the curriculum, Lyle and Paul. So what kind of binding thing would it have? You know, I'm sure the Putney School wants to keep their forest, but there's a number of people who say no natural gas. So.
And we spent, as I'm thinking about our board, we spent a lot of time over the last year meeting with other organizations within the community. So we meet with the library, we meet with select board to talk about ways in which we, the way we work together. And you don't have to be an elected board member to do that. I mean, that's an advisory board to do that.
Okay.
So can I suggest that Kim write up something for us?
Sure.
Does that work? And then we can touch base on it next time?
Is this one of the numbers on our report? It is, right?
I don't think it actually is, but I think it is one that speaks to a general concern.
We could include it in the report.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any particular question that asks for it, but I think it's a good
Is that-
addition to
We
it.
should do.
So it's 8 o'clock. We meet, when do we next meet?
29.
29.
Is that it? Can that be a 2-hour meeting again?
It can be whatever, because there's nobody else in the building.
Okay.
The heat will not really.
The heat will not be on?
Well, it
The
will,
heat won't be on?
it's never on at night.
But we have wood chips.
It's never on at night, so it won't be frigid, but, you know, it won't be 75.
I think we'll be on vacation.
I'll talk to the
Yeah,
people in
yeah.
the building to see.
Yeah, you do know somebody.
So, is there anything else?
Tell them we're Christmas present.
Anything else, or is there a motion to adjourn?
Just agenda items for next meeting. What we-
Yeah.
Well, also a financial model, we'll continue to look at that. Are there any particular things?
Well, we're gonna look at Kim's write-up. And,
Well, yeah.
Kim's right up.
does Craig anticipate having numbers already for us about programs?
Seems unlikely, but with all the budgets we have going on.
There'll be some examples that we can come up with. And then they won't be comprehensive. No, I mean, I have some things.
There we go.
Yeah, Frank, you just need to get your elves busy.
Yes, they're working, probably working it.
And hopefully, you might be able to chat with a lawyer or someone to advise you on the numbers.
6 o'clock this morning.
Okay? And if anyone has, yeah.
Christina said school choice.
We already talked to the board, that's what they thought was an issue.
We won't
Yeah. Boards won't
Yeah,
meet.
we'll do that in January.
Guilford will have a meeting.
We will.
We'll talk about it.
Oh, yeah, we can raise any,
Okay.
others don't, okay.
So, is there, sound good, Amy? Is motion moved? A second? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.